Let's talk to somebody who's knee-deep in the business right now, who really will understand the impact, and that is the president and CEO of Eli Lilly. David Ricks is with us right now. David, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria.
And congratulations. We've been wanting you to come on the show for a while, ever since the CEO transition, and I know this is very, very soon into the new job. So
that's right. Just started January, and a lot happening in the world already.
Yeah, we want to hear about it. So what's your take on the GOP plan in terms of health care for America?
Well, we applaud Speaker Ryan and Secretary Price for getting out and putting a proposal on the table that seems like a reasonable and concrete plan to, as they said, repeal Obamacare and replace it so patients who rely on some of these services can transition. Of course, it delegates more power to the states, which is what they said they would do, and it rolls back some of the regulations that the insurance companies have been concerned about.
As a company that produces important life-saving drugs and who really will see an impact, and patients will see an impact, what's most important about this repeal and replace plan? I mean, the taxes, two main taxes are going away. Is that a positive?
Well, right. So there's a tax on drugs, on medical devices, on investment income. They've rolled all those back, although a lot of commentators would say, well, the timing of that may change depending on how the bill gets scored. Of course, we're all for rolling back taxes on innovation, and that's really one of the principles we'd like to see is a healthcare system that rewards innovation, that encourages people, not discourages them from using the newest medications. And unfortunately, Maria, in the Affordable Care Act, medicines were very expensive for some of our poorest citizens, more expensive than other parts of the healthcare system. So we're hoping this replacement will level that playing field for innovation.
In fact, the president tweeted about drug prices yesterday, that they will come way down, and all the drug stocks traded lower. Now, I don't think he wants to do anything in terms of regulating drug prices, but he's trying to create a competitive marketplace so prices come down. Will it work?
Well, we're all for competition. In fact, if you look at the programs at the federal government level that really work for patients, and most manufacturers think work well for them and come in under budget, like Part D, which was introduced about 10 years ago, that is a competitive market where the government gets out of the way, lets private actors negotiate on their behalf with drug companies. Pretty much everyone's happy with that system. The parts of the system that aren't working is when the federal government introduces its own regulations, it skews the market, has unintended consequences, and kind of warps the system and doesn't reward innovation. So we're not for those things. I think what he said was more competition is needed, and we're all for more competition.
Right, and that's what he said in the tweet yesterday. I'm working on a plan to create more competition so that drug prices come way down. You think if the marketplace becomes competitive in some way, like he's saying, this will send prices down? Because what's the answer?
Well, as long as there's a marketplace, it can find the value, right? So the drugs that are producing the most value for patients with illnesses, that's when insurance companies are good at determining and negotiating with drug manufacturers. That system works in Part D today.
Yeah.
And if he's talking about expanding that concept beyond Medicare, we would be for that. Another form of competition we'd like to see is a number of the stories on high drug pricing have come out of really people that don't do what we do, which is research drugs and develop new drugs, but rather who have bought up old drugs where there's only one supplier. They raise the price exorbitantly sometimes. And, of course, they're drug manufacturers, but they're not our business model. If what he's talking about is introducing more competition so those sole source products don't have that situation where people can really exploit that situation, we'd be for that as well, because that's really an artifact of how the FDA has been rather slow in approving generic substitutes.
This is a really important point that you're making, and I'm glad you made it. Let's talk about tax reform, generally speaking, because the president yesterday said that tax reform is next on the agenda after the new health care plan is in place. You're a major advocate for tax reform, and I know that you sent a letter to the leadership on Capitol Hill. You were one of 16 CEOs who signed that letter, basically saying that it is so important to economic growth in general. Tell us what you're trying to get across to the leadership in Washington.
Well, basically, the system we have over the last 30 years is producing the economy we have, which is sluggish growth, a depression in middle-class wages, and a reduction in manufacturing, and an increase in the trade deficit. If we want to change any of those things, we need a new tax code. And the Ryan blueprint, that's the Brady blueprint that's come out of, been put forward by Congress, is the only plan sitting on the table right now. We are for, because we think it addresses all those things. It can drive economic growth above the slow rate we've been at. I think some of the provisions, like reducing the corporate tax rate to 20%, really makes America's tax code much more competitive with the rest of the world. And then going to a territorial system, which means basically you're taxed where you make the money. not taxed because you're American. Really, it would be a fundamental change and a much more competitive change. Most of the rest of the world has this kind of system. We double tax foreign earnings on American companies. I think that could unleash more investment and opportunity
so
in America,
you think lower taxes, corporate taxes, as well as taking away an additional tax overseas, that will change behavior on the part of CEOs? They'll bring money back from overseas. They'll invest in their business more because of lower taxes.
There's no question that today investments in the U.S. have multiple barriers to make sense versus putting them overseas. That's bad for American workers.
Yeah, it's a great point. I want to ask you about your own investments. Of course, Lilly saw strong revenue growth in the fourth quarter, fueled by your diabetes drug, Trulicity. And then, of course, back in January, you announced plans to acquire Colucid Pharmaceuticals. This is an all-cash transaction enhancing your existing portfolio in the way of migraine headaches, etc. Tell me where the growth comes from at Eli Lilly. You know you were in New York meeting with some investors this week.
That's right. Well, this is an exciting time for our company because we're coming out of a period where we lost patents on some very important drugs, and now we're entering a new growth period really based on the productivity of our pipeline and complemented by some acquisitions, like you mentioned, Colucid, which is a company that developed a migraine drug that aborts acute migraines. They're in phase 3. This could launch as early as 19. So we're excited about that. So really, Lilly's innovation productivity has improved dramatically. We've launched 7 drugs in the last 2 years, up to 13 more in the next 5 years. So we're in a very exciting time for innovation, and we've projected we will grow the top line by 5% between now and 2020 and expand margins along the way. So it's a good time for the company, a good time for a new CEO to step in.
Yeah, you also have an animal business, obviously, that has that has been talked about in terms of a growth vehicle as well. So when you look out over the next 5 years, you talked about those 13 drugs. That's the pipeline that you're talking about looking to drive growth. That's
right. So we've launched 7, 13 more to go. They're in phase 3 or phase 2 development. Of course, not all of them may work, but we think on average we could get up to 13 out of a rich pipeline we have. Really, innovation, biopharmaceutical innovation in the U.S. is it's a golden era right now. Lilly's being able to harness that. What we need is a market to sell them into, and changes like we saw to the healthcare market, adopting a more competitive system versus a government-regulated system are all things that we're standing for as well.
Do you need to do another acquisition in terms of scale?
No. We're the right scale to compete in our 4 therapeutic areas: diabetes, oncology, immunology, and Alzheimer's. We have world-class scientists in all those areas. And one of the benefits of Lilly right now is we're not the biggest drug company, about a little over $20 billion in revenue, but we have all these opportunities to grow, and investors are excited about that profile.
All right, David, we'll be watching your take and what you lead this company into growth going forward. Congratulations.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you soon. David Rex, Eli Lilly CEO.